The empty ward. I used to work as a nurse in a mid-sized hospital in a small town. The hospital wasn't very modern, but it had its share of strange stories. Every nurse knew about the East Wing, a part of the building that had been closed off for nearly 2 decades. Supposedly, it was once the psychiatric ward before the hospital expanded, but no one ever gave me a straight answer about why it was abandoned. One winter night, I was assigned to the overnight shift, 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. Things were quiet, too quiet, actually. Around 2 a.m., after finishing rounds, I went down to the basement to fetch some supplies. The basement had an old service elevator that connected to every floor, even the sealed-off East Wing. I'd been warned never to press the button for that floor, but of course, curiosity gnawed at me. As I pushed the cart into the elevator, the lights flickered. The elevator doors closed slowly, groaning as if reluctant to trap me inside. Without me touching anything, the elevator jolted and started moving upward. I thought maybe it was going to the ground floor, but instead, the display showed E. When the doors opened, I froze. The East Wing was supposed to be sealed off, but I was staring down a long, dimly lit corridor. Paint peeled from the walls. Broken beds lined the hallway. It smelled of rot and antiseptic, a combination that made me gag. My instinct screamed to leave, but my feet moved forward on their own, echoing in the silence. I heard something shuffle at the far end of the hall. A figure, thin, impossibly tall, was leaning against the wall. Its head was cocked at an unnatural angle. I tried to convince myself it was just an abandoned mannequin, but then it moved, slowly. Its head straightened, and I heard a cracking sound like dried twigs snapping. "Help me," a whisper crawled down the hall, though the figure's mouth never moved. I bolted back to the elevator, slamming the close button over and over. The door shut just as the figure started toward me. The last thing I saw was its long skeletal hand reaching out just inches away. When the doors opened again, I was back in the basement. Everything was normal, except the supply cart was gone. No one believed me when I told them. But 3 days later, a janitor quit after he swore he heard scratching and whispers near the sealed-off East Wing door. The elevator has since been deactivated, but sometimes on night shifts, staff claim they hear it moving on its own, stopping only at the E floor.
Gas station at 3 a.m. I worked night shifts at a rural gas station for a few months. It was one of those lonely jobs where the only visitors were truck drivers, insomniacs, or the occasional drunk. One night, around 3 a.m., I was restocking shelves when I heard the bell above the door. I walked out to the counter expecting to see someone, but the store was empty. I thought maybe the wind pushed the door, but when I checked, it was firmly shut. Then I noticed the security camera feed. On the monitor, a man stood at the counter staring directly at me. He wore a long coat, his face blurred as if the camera couldn't focus, yet when I looked up from the screen, the counter was empty. A chill spread through me. I went back to the screen. He was still there, but now his head was tilting back and forth, slowly, unnaturally. His hand rose, pointing at me through the monitor. And then, as though the sound came from right beside my ear, I heard, "Check pump 4." My heart hammered, but something compelled me to obey. I walked outside. Pump 4 was lit, even though no car was there. The hose hung loose, dripping fuel onto the pavement. The smell was overwhelming. I turned back toward the store, and that's when I saw him. The man from the monitor was standing inside, behind the counter where I had just been. His head twitched side to side. Even from outside, I could hear the faint sound of static, like an old television turned up too high. I sprinted back inside, but when I entered, he was gone. The rest of the night was uneventful, but the next morning, the manager called me into the office. He looked pale. Without saying a word, he showed me the CCTV footage. At exactly 3:04 a.m., I was standing behind the counter, talking and nodding as if someone was in front of me. Then I walked outside, alone. The camera never showed anyone else.
The graveyard security job. Years ago, I worked as a night shift security guard at a cemetery. Most people laughed when I told them, but the job paid well. My main task was to patrol the grounds, make sure no one was trespassing or vandalizing graves. At first, it was peaceful, but then came the December night I'll never forget. It was around 2:30 a.m., bitterly cold. My flashlight beam bounced across the headstones as I made my way down the main path. That's when I noticed something strange. One of the graves looked freshly dug. That was impossible. Burials didn't happen at night. The soil was piled neatly on either side. I leaned closer, my breath clouding the beam of my flashlight. The coffin lid was visible, cracked open. My stomach churned. Suddenly, I heard a scraping sound, like nails clawing at wood. Then, a faint voice, weak, muffled, desperate. "Let me out." I stumbled backward, nearly dropping the flashlight. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but something about that voice kept me frozen. It sounded too real, too human. Then the coffin lid shifted. Just an inch, but enough for me to see a pale hand pushing upward. Dirt crumbled away. The fingernails were torn, bloody. "Please." I turned and ran, sprinting back to the security hut. My radio crackled violently with static. Then a voice whispered through it, "Don't leave me here." I locked the door, trembling until sunrise. When the morning crew arrived, I told them everything. They laughed, brushed it off, and went to inspect the grave. It was gone. No fresh soil, no open coffin, just a normal, weathered gravestone like the rest. I quit the job that week. To this day, I refuse to walk near cemeteries at night.
The factory shadows. I used to work in a textile factory on the night shift. The place was massive, with rows of old machines clattering in unison, and only 3 workers covering the whole floor overnight. One night, the power went out around 1 a.m. That wasn't unusual. The building's wiring was old. We used flashlights to check the breakers. As I swept the beam across the room, I saw movement between the machines. A shadow darted past. I thought it was my coworker, but when I called out, no one answered. A few minutes later, we got the power running again. The machines roared back to life, but something felt wrong. The air was heavier, thicker, like walking underwater. And then I noticed something chilling. There were more shadows on the floor than there should have been. Every worker cast one, but there were dozens of others, stretching long, twisted, moving against the light. I tried to convince myself it was a trick of the machinery, until one shadow detached itself from the ground. It rose, stretching tall, hollow eyes staring back at me. I screamed. My coworkers came running, but by the time they arrived, it had melted back into the floor. Later, While cleaning near one of the machines, I found deep scratch marks etched into the steel, like claws had raked across it. No one could explain how they got there. On my last night, before I quit, I stayed late to pack my locker. As I turned off my flashlight, I caught one last glimpse. All the shadows in the factory, standing still, facing me, waiting. I left everything behind and never went back.